Hey, welcome back to the Crabby Dice. Today we're looking at Last Will from one of my favorite designers, Vladimir Suchi. I decided to go back into his catalog because I'm having so much fun with underwater cities. This one is one of his first games. It's almost 10 years old at this point, and maybe we'll get a 10-year anniversary edition next year. Who knows? So what is Last Will? Just to give you a high-level concept, it's sort of a mishmash of two things. There's worker placement here where you're getting cards, and there's also a tableau hand management portion where you're trying to manipulate your cards to lose as much money, because the winner is whoever loses all his money first. So that's interesting on its own. So I won't tell you what I think about the game. For that, go see my playthrough and other video below. It has my review and playthrough. This is more of a sanitized look on just the setup and rules breakdown. Also, I like to warn you that the rules section is a little long because explaining every type of card and how they work gets a little intense. So bear with me. Alright, so let's get started. But before we do, always the three things. Please like, please subscribe, please comment on my videos. Let me know if I made any mistakes. Let's get started. Alright, the Last Will setup and terminology part of the video. So it's actually pretty easy. The game board, lay it out. Set it to the side of the number of players. You're going to see in the scrolls in the top right what player count they are used for. In a 3 and 5 player game, you'll have this middle board. So lay it out right in the middle here. Next, you got your little round tracker here, it's a little octagonal piece. Put on number 1. You'll set out the property modification value tokens here on top of the property. Just mix them up and put them out. Now, we're going to teach you what all the cards mean. Alright, so this is called the helper / expenses deck. Put them out here. These are called the events. Put them out here. These are the properties. Put them out here. And these are the companions. These all stand for the basic card decks, but we'll go through that in the rules. For right now in the setup, what you're going to look at is here. The round number will tell you what kind of card goes into that slot. So here and here would be properties, and here would be helpers. Alright, two more kind of cards. First are special cards. So they have 1 crown, 2 crown, and 3 crown. Make sure to put the 1s on top of the 2s on top of the 3s. You can shuffle them before stacking them on top of each other. And then here, the first 3 are going to be special cards. Alright, easy enough. The last kind of card are these wild companion cards. So just put out 1 here. The second one will come into play later in the game, so I just like to keep it here. Just forget about it. Now, a couple of extra things. These are the extension boards. Best place to keep them is right here, because to get them, the spot is right here. And lastly, I hope you have a Plano with all your tokens. Put this near the game board, so easy reach for everyone. Let's go to player boards. So now, this is a player board. Just give them one of these gray markers that'll track their actions. They're going to start with 2 of these top hats. 1 of these to pick their actions every round. $70 for your first game. I'll teach you how to decide these later on. And finally, decide who first player is. Give them this marker. In this game, I'll be first player. Oh, before we start, hand everyone 3 helpers and 3 properties. Before the game starts, you're going to have to take 2 out of these 6 cards. It can be a combination of either one of these. But then there, we're ready to go. So let's go to the rules, and we'll talk about how all these things work together. Alright, the Last Will rules section. So, Last Will, great game. How does it play? It's sort of a worker placement game where you're going to be placing workers on this board here, but also an action selection game because you'll be doing actions on your personal board over here. Alright, so it's a combination or mishmash of a couple of different things. So, how does the game flow and how do you win? Well, the game flows fairly simply. There's going to be 7 rounds to the game, and every single round is divided into the same 5 steps. So we'll be doing those 5 steps every single round. Now, before we get into that, how do you win? So that's the unique part of this game, is that for once we're not collecting victory points. You're just trying to lose your money. So the first person to go bankrupt is going to end the game. So it's a race. You can actually end the game before it hits its 7 rounds. So if someone loses all their money on round 5, that's it. We're only going to play 5 rounds. Alright, easy enough. Now let's talk about those 5 things and then go into detail. So those 5 things. 1, setup. 2 is planning. 3 is errands. We're going to send our tokens on the board. 4 is actually doing actions on your player board. And 5 is the cleanup. Alright, let's talk about setup first. It's the easiest thing ever. So at the beginning of the round, this whole card slots will be empty. So you'll just fill up the cards according to the charts on each slot. For example, for this slot here, for rounds 1 through 3, put a property card, which are these. And rounds 4 and above, you put an event card. Alright, easy enough. Good. Next is the planning phase. Alright, so each player is going to have one of these planning discs in player order. So starting with the person with the black totem here, you'll be placing your planning disc on one of these 7 or so slots over here. So let's say I'm first player and I want to go here, and then the next player wants to go here, and then the other player wants to go here. Alright, this is going to give you 4 very important pieces of information. First, how many cards you draw right away. So only from the general decks here, you'll draw that many cards. You have to draw them all without looking at them. So you can't look at this card and then decide I want to grab this card, and then look at that card and say I want to grab this card, and so on. You grab all, let's say 5 right away. So you say, well, one of these, 2 of these, 1 of these, and 1 of these. Let's just say. Alright. Second piece of information, I'll tell you how many errand boys you'll have for the phase 3. Alright, so for the next phase, it'll tell you how many you have. So for example, red's only gonna have 1, whereas yellow and blue will have 2. That's these little top hat guys. Then it'll tell you how many actions you'll have for phase 4. Right, so the planning will tell you what you're doing on phase 3 and 4, technically. Okay, so on phase 4, it'll tell you what your base actions are gonna be. So red's gonna have 4 actions, whereas blue's only going to have 1 action. Alright, this could be modified with certain cards, but that's our base actions that we'll have. Alright, and the fourth very important, very important information that it tells you is for phase 3 and 4, the player order that you'll follow. Even though we have a player order for the round, that only affects the planning phase. For phase 3 and 4, you're going to be following the discs that are placed here. So for the errand boy step, blue will be first, red will be second, yellow will be third. Alright, easy enough. Alright, so let's talk about the errand phase. Alright, in this phase, very simple. You're just going to be placing your errand boys, which are these top hat guys, to grab cards or manipulate some board effects here. So very easy. So remember, in turn order, the new turn order that was decided here, you'll be placing out your top hat guys. I'm just placing these out randomly for now, just to make sure covering one of every slot. Let's just pretend this guy was here. So anything very easy, anything to the left of this spot here is you just take the card that's displayed, right? So if you put a guy here, you'll get this card. If you put a guy here, you'll take this card. Now for this slot here, you'll just decide as soon as you put the thing or your token which of the 3 cards you want, because there's only 2 slots for 3, right? It's only 2 out of 3 will be taken every round. If you flip the board around, it's 3 out of 4, let's just say. Alright, if you put a worker here, you'll grab one of these board extensions. Super easy. So instead of having only slots for 5 cards, you can have spots for 6 cards. This spot here, sort of a last resort. If you really don't have a use for your token, you put it here to go to the theater, spend $2. Kind of useless. Here, just grab 1 card off the top of the deck. So let's say you don't like any of these cards over here, you can send your worker to your own color here and just grab a card of your choice. And lastly is the real estate manipulation area here, is you get to readjust the prices of all the properties for the rest of the round. So you switch them however you like, let's say like that. Alright, let's talk about the action steps now. Alright, the action phase. This is the heart of the game, really. This is where you're going to be trying to lose all your money. So I already grabbed some cards from some of these decks. We're going to sort of explain what all the type of cards mean, because there's a lot of things going on. And just to be clear, I just grabbed a couple of cards off every stack to show you how all these cards work, right? So at the beginning of this phase, the first thing you're going to do is set your action marker, which is going to be at the bottom of your planning disc on your own player board. For example, red would have 3. So it'd move his action disc on the 3 spot here. That means for this phase, you have 3 actions that you can perform for the turn. Alright. So let's say this was my hand of cards. I'll show you what all these cards sort of mean and how they work. So in general, even though there are 3 different colored cards, there's only 2 different colors we need to look at. There's white cards, which are one-offs that you discard and that don't go on your player board, and black bordered cards that go on your player board here. Alright, so let's talk about the white cards first because they're the easiest. So these, the way they work is you discard or you lower the amount of actions discarded in the coin here. So for example, here I can lose 1 action to just spend $3 from my personal supply, and then I will discard this into the discard pile. And this card works a bit different. I would discard 2 actions to lose $4, or I can discard 2 actions to spend $7 if I also discard a lady, which is written right here. Discarding the lady doesn't add any extra actions, it just goes with the card. So now I discard this card, discard this card, and lose $7, right? Because it would be the total. So that's how the white cards work. After that, let's talk about the other kind of cards. There's going to be property cards, which are the houses. There's going to be helpers, which are the top hats. And there's going to be expenses, which are the other type of icon over here. There's a bunch of different types, all right? So these cards go onto your player board. So let's do that. So by playing a card off the start, there might be extra cost in the top left here, but it'll cost you an action to play the card. So you'll look here to play the card, it costs an action. To play this property card, it'll cost me an action, and it'll cost me money. You might have a different card that has an extra cost over here. So let's say there was another action here, it would cost 2 actions to play the card. This one doesn't have it, but there are some examples like that. All right, so that's how that works. Let's go into detail on all these cards, really, because they're all kind of different. So helpers, what they do is they, in general, give you a special ability. That's it. Just look at the back of the manual. They're all very unique. You just have to look. Like this one is, you get to activate a farm without having to waste an action. So for example, if I had a farm in my card row, I can activate the farm. Instead of losing the action, I can just lose the money without losing the action. Alright? Alright, so that's how helpers work. Some of them do have a coin, so you can activate them. So let's go back here. So you could activate a card and do its ability in the top right. Sometimes they have a something, sometimes they have nothing. So this helper, I really don't have to activate because he doesn't really give me any benefit. Some of them have coins or something like that. So you'd activate them and lose the coins. Alright, so the next card we'll talk about are expenses. So again, it costs an action to play them. And in the future, you just activate the cards, right? So this one is free to activate. So there's no A in the coinage. You see here? So in the future, I can just activate this card and lose $1. I could alternatively, by looking at this card, discard a chef card. So now we're going to talk about these blue cards here. So there's 4 different kinds. One of them is a chef, but in the future I could discard a chef card and an action, so lower my action by 1, and discard a chef, and play a chef disc. I'm not sure why there's different colored discs, but there are, and put a chef disc here. In the future, when I activate this card, so by sliding it up, you'll lose $2 instead of $1. And then again in the future, I can put another chef here for an action, and then for free, because there's no actions here, I'll spend $4 instead of $2 or $1. Alright, very important for all these type of cards, there's always an arrow, so you have to place your companions in order. So you have to place this chef before, let's say if this was a lady or something else, would have to be put in order. In this case, they're both chefs, so it doesn't really matter. All right, so anyway. So that's how these expenses work. So you activate them, you do lose their money, what's on the right hand side. Don't forget to pay for the actions if they're written on the coins. All right, so that's how expenses work. And lastly, there's properties. So for properties, there's two different kind of properties. So even more different kinds. So you got sort of mansions over here and townhouses and so on, which have prices that can go down, and then you have farms, which is a static price here. So when you play a property, very, very important. As soon as you play it, it's going to cost you an action and you have to pay the price of the property. The price of the property could and will be modified by the game board here. So for example, if I want to play a farm, I pay $3 less. You have to look at this chart here. So instead of paying 25, I'll be paying only 22. Which is bad. You're trying to lose money. So instead of buying low, you always want to buy high. All right, it's the opposite of real life. So you actually want to play this one. It's at +3. So you spend 28, and then you can sell this off at 22. So you can lose $6, right? So farms are always simple, always the same type of thing. On the right here, you can add animals and stuff so that when you activate them, you lose more money. All right, so those are farms. They work exactly like events or expenses. All right, except it's always animals and you activate them to lose money. All right, every other type of house, same situation, except you're gonna look at only the top value here, and that'll tell you the initial price you pay for the house with the modifier. So let's say yellow here. We're gonna look at the yellow type of house, which is the first one. Sort of, you can't see it right now. So it's -2. So now I would pay $8 for this house. When you buy a house, you're gonna take one of these housing markers and you're gonna put on the first one. All right. So the right hand side works exactly like the other two type of cards we talked about. If you activate the card by, it's called maintenance, you're gonna lose that much coinage. Alternatively, if you don't activate this card for the round, the house decays and it's going to slide down at the end of the round. We'll talk about that during the end of round phase, but that's how it happens, right? So eventually this can go down and then you can sell the house for 5 instead of the 10, so you lose even more money. All right, so that's how these work. So they work the same as these cards if you activate them, or if you don't activate them, they'll decay in price. So just move this marker down. All right, that's every type of card. Easy. They are special cards. They work sort of the same way as all these type of cards, except they all have special abilities. Look at the back of the book. Like this one gives you an extra action every round, and so on and so on. All right, so white you discard for the round. Blacks go on your board. Now, very important, you only have slots for 5. You can always, at any point, discard a helper or an expense. If you need an extra slot, you can just discard that card. Property, you can never discard. You have to sell the property. So it takes an action to sell the property. You're going to discard it, lose an action, and again, look at the property value and sell it off. Okay? Take back money. All right, let's talk about the end of round stuff now. All right, for end of round, very simple. On your own player board, a couple of things you need to do is re-engage all your cards so you can activate them next round. If you had any properties that were still on the unactivated side, you'd move down their marker like we already mentioned before. You'll discard down to 2 cards. Very, very, very important. You always discard down to 2 cards unless you have a special ability. So even if you grab 7 cards, you can only carry 2 cards over to the next turn. Reset your action to 0. On the main board, very simple. Just return everyone their markers. Clear off any cards that were not taken. All right, including the special cards. Move down the turn track and move the first player marker over a round. Now, if somebody went bankrupt that round, that'll trigger the end game and you're done. All right. One very important piece of information I had not mentioned, which I should have mentioned in an earlier phase, I'm sorry about that, is you cannot go bankrupt if you have any properties on your board. So as long as you have properties on your board, like here and here, you can't go bankrupt because you have properties. So you have to sell off your properties before you go bankrupt. Alright, so keep that in mind. You can run out of money but not go bankrupt because you have properties. You have to spend an action to sell off the property and you'll make back some money, and I guess you'll have to figure out a different way to lose money. Alright, so very, very important. That's the game. Try to lose all your money with no properties and just keep doing rounds, we do actions, lose more money, 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 money. Alright, so that's the rules breakdown, and we'll see you at the playthrough, which is the next video. Later.